Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I want to put this thought in your head, right? Like, how would it feel to owe no taxes, right? That's a calming thought, right? Like, it calms you down. You owe nothing on your federal tax return, right? You can make it happen if you handle your withholdings, like, smart, right? You know what you're doing. The W-4 form that you fill out for your employer when you start a new job determines how much income taxes, going to be withheld from your paycheck, and ultimately, how much tax you will either owe or get back as a refund at the end of the year. What you may not know, it's not a one time thing. You can submit a revised W 4 form to your employer whenever you want. Managing how much your employer withholds through your W 4 form will give you a better shot at owing no taxes, come April. You also should avoid having too much withheld, right? That would be giving, Uncle Sam an interest free loan all year. So, you should, if you're a salaried employee with a steady job, it's relatively easy to calculate your tax liability for the year, right? You can predict what your total income is going to be. Millions of Americans don't fall into that category. They work freelance, have multiple jobs, work for an hourly rate, or they depend on commissions, bonuses, tips, stuff like that, right? Well, if you're one of them, you'll need to make an educated guess based on your earnings history and how your year's gone so far. But from there, there's several ways to get a good estimate of your tax liability, right? So let's go over some of these, right? So the first thing you might want to do is use an online check calculator, right? There's a number of free income, tax calculators online. If you enter your gross pay, your pay frequency, your federal filing status, and some other relevant information, it's just going to give you, your tax liability per paycheck. You can multiply that number, that by the number of pay periods in a year to see your total tax liability. This method's pretty easy, and the result will be reasonably accurate, right? It may not be perfect, since your actual tax liability may depend on some other variables, such as whether you itemize deductions and which tax credits you claim, stuff like that, right? So the second thing is, using a tax withholding estimator, right? The tax withholding estimator on the IRS website, it can be really useful, with more, people who have more complex tax situations, right? It will ask about factors like eligibility for child independent care tax credits, whether and how much you contribute to a tax deferred retirement plan or an HSA, which is a health savings account, and how much federal tax you had withheld from your most recent paycheck. And based on the answers to your questions, it will tell you your estimated tax obligation for the year, how much you will have paid, withholdings by year end, and your expected overpayment or underpayment, right? Another thing to talk about is you can fill out a sample tax return, right? Just complete a sample tax return for the year, whether you're using like a tax software or downloading the forms from the IRS website and filling them out by hand. You can also get them from the library if you're curious. In this method, you know, it should give you the most accurate picture of your annual tax liability. If you're using last year's tax software or IRS forms, make sure that, there haven't been significant changes to the rules or the tax rates that would affect, whatever situation you're in. Another thing you need to pay attention to is, adjusting your tax withholding. So, once you know the total amount that you will owe in federal taxes, the next step is figuring out how much you need to have withheld per pay period to reach, but not exceed, that target by December 31st. Of course, then you're going to have to fill out a new W 4, right? So, like we talked about earlier, you don't have to wait for your employer's human resource department to hand you a new W 4 form. You can print one yourself from the IRS website. If not enough is being withheld, so the W 4 form has a place to indicate the amount of additional tax that you would like to have withheld each pay period, right? If you've underpaid so far, subtract the amount that you're on track to pay by the end of the year, right? And at your current level of withholding from the amount that you will owe in total. Then divide the result by the number of pay periods that remain in the year, right? That's going to tell you how much extra you're going to want to have withheld from each paycheck, right? So, you could also decrease the number of withholding allowances that you claim, but the results won't be as accurate, right? But let's say you've been overpaying. Well, unless you're looking forward to, I don't know, like a maybe you like that big refund or something, try increasing the number of withholding allowances that you claim on the W-4, right? Deciding on the exact number can be tricky. The best method is to plug different numbers of withholding allowances into a paycheck calculator until it hits the amount closest to the federal tax that you want to have withheld for each pay period going forward. As a side note, the IRS requires that you have a reasonable basis for the withholding allowances that you claim. It doesn't want you fiddling with its form just to avoid paying taxes until the last minute, right? If you don't have enough tax withheld, then you could be subject to underpayment penalties. Bear in mind that you need to have enough tax withheld throughout the year to avoid underpayment penalties and interest. You can do this by making sure your withholdings equals at least 90% of your current year's tax liabilities or 100% of the previous year's tax liabilities, right? Whichever is smaller. You also avoid penalties if you owe less than $1,000 on your tax return. There's also other ways to adjust your W-4, right? If it's so early in the year that you haven't yet received any paychecks, you can just divide your total tax liability for the year that just ended by the number of paychecks that you receive in a year. Then compare that amount to the amount that's withheld from your first paycheck of the year once you get it, and make any adjustments from there, right? If you adjust your W-4 to make up for any underpayment or overpayment partway through the year, then you'll want to fill out a new W-4 in January. Otherwise, your withholding will be off for the new year. Of course, if your income fluctuates unpredictably, a lot of this, it's harder, right? But following these steps, they can help you get closer to a reasonable number, right? I really hope this guys is gonna help you. When tax season is coming up here pretty soon. Currently, it's about to be Thanksgiving, and the holidays are coming up. But tax season's right around the corner. I want you guys to start thinking about it, get ahead of this, right? I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. Until I see you guys in the next video. Y'all be safe.